The president has called it an invasion. Media outlets call it the caravan, and here in Mexico it's been called el éxodo, the exodus. Whatever the name, the group of thousands of Hondurans and other Central Americans has started to arrive at the U.S. border in Tijuana. One group looking to see whether they're let in to pursue asylum are the 2,400 Central Americans sheltering in Mexico City. Over the past few days, the predominantly Salvadoran group has gathered at the Estadio Palillo Martínez, an open-air stadium in the city. 26-year-old Walter Luna is from El Salvador. He says his personal experience with the country's violent crime drove him to leave San Salvador with a group of 2,000 others on October 31st.
En el caso mío, tuve la pérdida de mi papá por situaciones de la violencia. Lo mataron a machetazos en un río. Lo hicieron picadillo. La delincuencia me lo picó.
Violence and a lack of political and economic stability were common reasons people gave for leaving their homes. And Professor Cecilia Imaz Bayona, an immigration researcher at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, says the media attention that caravans have gotten recently has bolstered their numbers.
Se hizo viral. Vieron la oportunidad de juntarse. Saben que cruzar por México está lleno de riesgos. Pueden ser asaltados, pueden ser golpeados, secuestrados, utilizados por el crimen organizado como mulas.
Imaz says the group has found safety in numbers and in international human rights pacts Mexico is party to and has advocated for. Members of the group also said they'd received support from several organizations along the way. Guadalupe Chipotle is the chief coordinator of an NGO feeding people at the stadium. She says that while the generosity of volunteers in Mexico City was enough to support the 2 large caravans that have already passed through, it's unclear if more will follow.
Todo Centroamérica está a la expectativa de qué es lo que va a conseguir esta población, porque los pronósticos no son buenos. En el lugar en donde queden varados y la forma en la que van a intentar sobrevivir, ese mensaje va a llegar a sus pueblos.
With a new federal government coming to power in Mexico soon and a populist president-elect who has expressed support for the migrants, the future for these groups is hard to predict. But for Luna, the future is focused on one thing.
Buscar un punto estratégico, la forma de pasar esa frontera. La situación es, el objetivo principal es pasar la frontera, llegar a Estados Unidos de Norteamérica.
Let's break down the caravan news with CEO of Nexus Services, the company funding the law firm representing the Migrant Caravan, Mike Donovan, and former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, retired Army Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. Great to have both of you with us tonight.
Great to be here.
Okay, so we have this video that we want to show. This is some migrants scaling a wall and arriving in San Diego. This is what Fox 5 there in San Diego is reporting. They say people on the Mexican side of the border could be seen climbing the fence near Borderfield State Park Tuesday afternoon after part of the Central American Migrant Caravan arrived in Tijuana. Several people scaled the fence. You can see them there sitting on top of it. A few jumped or crawled to openings in the fence onto U.S. soil. Mike, we were told they're not going to be here for a while, and this is not a legitimate thing.
Well, the caravan is absolutely a legitimate thing, and it's appropriate for us to all pay attention to it. We've had investigators embedded in the caravan, so I understand that this group that broke off is a large, several dozen members are LGBTQ, escaping persecution in their home countries. LGBTQ folks in Central America have a hard time because police oftentimes are also gang members. The gangs are very anti-LGBTQ. So this is we know thousands of people have been granted asylum in the United States because of LGBTQ-related persecution. So we know this is legitimate. Now these folks come to the border, they don't know what to do in many cases, but they are making themselves known, and I think we should appreciate that. I mean, they're not crawling across and hiding. They're making themselves known, and they're trying to effectuate a process that this president and this administration has made very difficult by saying you have to go to very specific places. Migrants coming don't know where to go. It's a very confusing thing. And when you add them to the mix, putting thousands of troops on the border, militarizing our southern border, it's an incredibly dangerous thing.
Well, and just, so we're clear, they cannot take on a law enforcement activity at all. All they can do is work in a support capacity. Now, part of this lawsuit that you all are supporting, this is from some Honduran migrants and representing their children as well who are on the way here. You say this, or the lawsuit says this: Trump's professed and enacted policy towards thousands of caravanners seeking asylum in the United States is shockingly unconstitutional. President Trump continues to abuse the law, including constitutional rights, to deter Central Americans from exercising their lawful right to seek asylum in the United States. General.
Well, first of all, there's a lot of things wrong with this.
With the lawsuit, with the claims?
No, not with the lawsuit. I don't even, you know, I'm not a lawyer. I can't answer that. But what I can tell you is, as a grandfather of 6, how do I, as a grandfather, teach my grandchildren to respect our laws, to respect our law enforcement when we have a spectacle like this of people taunting our law enforcement on the border and flaunting the fact that they're breaking our laws? How do I, and I understand this whole thing is an issue of compassion. But let me tell you, Monday was Veterans Day. How about a misplaced compassion that ought to be placed on these veterans that have served this nation so honorably and that can't get a colonoscopy at a VA hospital because of a substandard medical care? That should require some attention and compassion by the same people that are out here advocating to let these people into our country and break our laws.
Are you saying that it's a financial issue? Like if we're spending money on people come here seeking asylum or illegally, that those funds aren't going to people like our own vets?
That's exactly what is happening, Shannon. I mean, it's a matter of priorities in terms of spending, but it's also a matter of priorities in terms of compassion. Where's the compassion for these veterans that really need our support here in America to make sure they get the kind of care that they need?
And Mike, how do we balance this with having borders, having a rule of law so that people can come here and get the protections that they need legitimately? I mean, the New York Times reporting today, 800 are already at Tijuana, and they say thousands are expected to arrive in the next several days. I mean, this is going to be an overwhelming situation.
Well, I have a company that employs hundreds of people. In general, we hire veterans. We provide great quality benefits for veterans.
Thank you for doing
you
that.
can do both. You can support veterans and support the rule of law. We have a law that says that you can apply for asylum in this country, and there are constitutional rights around due process. These migrants have them. I think you can do both, and I think
if they're not yet on U.S. soil, though.
Yeah, if they're not yet on U.S. soil, but they plan to seek asylum under U.S. law, then they have due process rights under U.S. law. And I know a lot of people have been confused about this, but it's a very clear thing. The law, the INA that relates
so why wouldn't everybody coming here say, I'm coming for asylum? I mean, everyone.
Because it's an great question. It's an arduous process. The first thing you do is go through a credible fear interview. So you get detained, and then you go through a credible fear interview with an asylum officer. That is an individual who works for the Trump administration. And only when that fear is determined credible are you eligible for release. There's a lot of rhetoric around this, Shannon, that's not true. People have to understand that these migrants seeking asylum go through a long, arduous process to get it, and we should allow and honor that. We shouldn't change it, and the president shouldn't be changing it with proclamations. It's not constitutional.
Mike, General, good to have you both.
Well, right now you can see that they are trying to strengthen this border even more. There is a crane here. They are putting barbed razor wire across the top. There are some migrants, some would-be asylum seekers on the other side of this fence. I don't know if you can make them out because it's quite bright, but there are several here. And this is the caravan that we've been talking about, we've been hearing about in the news for several weeks. Now, there are 3 groups here to really mention. First of all, you've got the main caravan. This is the one that's been getting all of the media attention. Originally thought to be around 7,000 strong, now thought to be nearer to around 3,000 and about 1,000 miles away at the moment. That group is still on its way, but don't forget there's all these, what you might call splinter groups. Yesterday we had 80 LGBT would-be asylum seekers turning up at the border. We're told they were given help by non-governmental organizations, by pressure groups, to get rides, to get bus tickets, to get them nearer to the border. Also, another 250 arrived later in the day. Told also, I mean, we actually saw pictures of them climbing up onto the border. Some of them got to the top. A few of them actually got over to the border. Their feet were planted onto U.S. soil. And here's what a few of them had to say.
We're waiting for everyone in the caravan to come. And we're going to see what solution there is now that we're right at the border of the U.S. And some are coming with the idea that some family members will cross the border with coyotes. Others will request asylum.
For now, we're waiting to see what solutions there might be after a while, to see if there's a possibility to enter or not. Because if there's no possibility to enter, and if we're going to run a lot of risk, then we're going to wait a while here in Tijuana.
We are told that the migrant camps on the other side of the border over there in Tijuana are absolutely packed. At the moment, there are weeks and weeks of waiting for asylum hearings. So we're told that the groups that arrived yesterday may not be heard until the end of the year. Then, of course, you've got these extra thousands, reportedly, according to the AFP news agency, 1,500 arriving today. So lots of people heading this way, the police, the army, and the government keeping a very watchful eye. Who knows what's going to happen?
Anticipation and uncertainty. It's growing at our border ahead of the arrival of thousands of migrants, and now they will be greeted by this brand new wall. Good evening. I'm Steve Atkinson.
And I'm Lindsay Pena. We have team coverage on the escalation surrounding that caravan, beginning with 10 News reporter Jennifer De La Cruz on what's been a busy day of construction at San Ysidro.
A big difference in what the wall looks like now compared to just a couple months ago. So construction crews are out here working to replace this is the old wall, and what sits behind it, the new wall that they've been working on putting in. It's significantly taller. You can see through it, and it has anti-climbing properties. So an entirely different story from what sat here for several years. A Border Patrol spokesman says it's not related to the caravan, though. This is all part of a construction project that started back in June. The government replacing 14 miles of the scrap metal wall. Construction started about half a mile from the ocean east to the bottom of Otay Mountain. The old wall was about 10 feet high. The new one, though, stands between 18 to 30 feet tall. You can see right through it, giving border agents a better look at what's happening on the other side. It also has an anti-climbing plate at the top of it. The old wall was originally put in back in the 90s. Border Patrol agents say this new wall is an important milestone on their work to secure the border. I spoke with a military veteran here today who says this construction is probably causing confusion for people in that migrant caravan.
I'm all for them wanting to better themselves, but there's a proper way to go about doing it. And coming in here and trying to cross an unfinished wall, again, I think it's creating a problem for people on both sides of that fence.
Now, the whole project costs about $147 million. Once again, it started in June. They're working on this section for now in San Ysidro. They still have a little bit of work to do here before they move on to the next part of the wall. Reporting live, Jennifer De La Cruz, 10 News.
As many as 4,000 Central American migrants could arrive in Tijuana, Mexico today, which is just across the U.S. border from California. The first wave of several hundred arrived earlier this week. A few have jumped the barricade, including a woman carrying a baby, but any attempt to cross ends with certain capture.
I'd like you to think of border security just the same as your home, and when someone comes to your home, they're supposed to go to the front door and present themselves.
In preparation for the migrants, the border is being hardened on both sides. The U.S. and Mexican militaries placed barricades, barbed wire, and closed at least 3 lanes at the Tijuana crossing, which backed up traffic at the busiest land border crossing in the Western Hemisphere.
First, our top story. Hundreds of migrants from the Central America Caravan are arriving at the U.S. border. This is video from Tijuana, Mexico yesterday. Tonight, the migrants are filling up shelters as they figure out their next move.
Meanwhile, a San Antonio pastor who spent 5 days traveling with that group is back home tonight.
Eyewitness News reporter Addie Guajardo sat down with him to talk about the migrants' mission for a better life.
So right now we are on top of the semis and we took a break and they're passing out water.
It's a trip Pastor Gavin Rogers says he needed to experience to understand the stories behind the faces of migrants enduring harsh conditions for weeks on foot and cramped in trucks to reach the U.S.
People are escaping extreme tragedy, extreme situations that are haunting to hear. Teenagers who have been raped, family members have been murdered or kidnapped. Let's take a look.
He documented every moment, even shared stories with KENS 5 via Skype of migrants like Brian Mauricio, who made the painful decision to make the journey alone.
Mi familia, mis hermanos, todos ellos. No sé, que los amo, que siempre voy a estar ahí para ellos.
Mi bebé tiene 3 años y lo dejé con mi mami.
They say they're escaping the grim reality of their homeland.
Me amenazaron de muerte y amenazaron a mi familia y tengo miedo. Corrupción, maras.
Mucha violencia ahí, falta de trabajo.
Agarren agua pues acá. Dismay fueling their mission, some guided by God's words, seeking hope despite their fear.
Due to the number of people coming this way.
Que todos los que vienen aquí no son criminales, son obreros, trabajadores, con ganas de trabajar. No queremos dañar a nadie, vamos en paz. Queremos estudiar también.
Primeramente Dios, trabajar y luchar por él.
With hundreds of miles until Mauricio reaches Tijuana, he wants to share one message.
Dios quiera que sí, porque hemos sufrido mucho.
Stories that moved Pastor Rogers, and he hopes will spark compassion in a divided country.
You could experience and get to know the people who are walking this caravan. It would completely change your heart and most likely your mind.
Addie Guajardo, KENS 5 Eyewitness.
Hey, good morning, Mark. Well, concertina wire, barriers, barricades, even some fencing. Those are just a few of the materials that you're going to see down here, especially here at the DeConcini Port of Entry, that troops are really trying to put up as they beef up the entrances here as they wait for that migrant caravan. This is all a part of what the Department of Defense is now calling Operation Secure Line. If you remember a little bit over a week ago, they were calling this Operation Faithful Patriot. That no longer the case. We do have some video of what you'll see if you're down here, if we can get that on screen. Now, if you are here, there's a few things that you're not going to be able to miss. The first one, those long lines of people trying to get into the U.S. And the reason that those lines are there is because troops have closed down 2 different lanes here at this port of entry. They've blocked them off with what looks like 2 storage containers. On top of those, there is some added on concertina wire. The second, of course, there is a good amount of extra troops here in the area. Now, all of these extra measures as they continue, like I said, anticipating the arrival of that migrant caravan, which they do expect will be arriving here within the next week. Now, in a release, Customs and Border Protection did add that they don't expect to take down any of this wire, to do away with any of these troops or those 2 closed lanes until that caravan arrives. So that is something to keep in mind if you expect to be coming in to the U.S. through this port of entry. Reporting live from the DeConcini Port of Entry, Veronica Acosta, KGA 9 on your side.
We have team coverage on the developments happening right now. Let's begin with 10 News reporter Jennifer De La Cruz. She is at the San Ysidro border crossing. Jen?
So we're in the parking lot just behind the outlets, and they're doing some construction here. It's been about 2 weeks now that they've worked on this section. You see the old border wall is right here in front, and behind it is the new wall that they're working on putting in place. It is much taller. You can see through it, and it also has an anti-climbing aspect to it. Now, a Border Patrol spokesman says this is not related to the caravan. It's all part of construction that started back in June. The government is replacing 14 miles of the scrap metal wall. Construction started about half a mile from the ocean east to the bottom of Otay Mountain. Now, the old wall was about 10 feet high. The new one stands anywhere between 18 to 30 feet tall, and you can see through it, giving border agents a better look at what's happening on the other side. It also has an anti-climbing plate at the top. The old wall was originally constructed in the 90s. Border Patrol agents say this new wall is an important milestone on their work to secure the border. The whole project cost about $147 million. And according back out here live, Border Patrol agents say this whole project costs about $147 million. Once again, replacing the old wall with that new wall much higher. You can see through it, so better surveillance properties there. And of course, this comes at a time when a lot of people are working on seeking asylum here in the United States. Reporting live in San Ysidro, Jennifer De La Cruz, 10 News.
Local organizations receiving faith leaders from across the country here to raise awareness on border issues. I'm Daniel Marin.
And I'm Natasha Paloma. The group says they're here to take a stand in welcoming migrants. KTSM 9 News reporter Stephanie Shields has this story.
With faith, prayer, and voice, religious leaders from across the country are touring the borderland at sites like Tornillo's Tent City and the U.S.-Mexico border.
And we were trying to find a way where we could come and support local attempts, local groups that are working on the asylum issue and working to help shut the camp down.
The Let Our Families Go caravan consists of nearly 70 interfaith clergy leaders and 120 members making a 4-day trip to Tornillo to bring attention to border issues. The group coordinated with local organizations here in the borderland.
And they could not, in good conscience, stay where they were and wanted instead to express their solidarity and to bear witness to what's going on here locally.
Following the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the Let Our Families Go Caravan felt committed to see the immigration issues here in the borderland.
And so they're here with open ears and an open heart and an open mind to see what's going on here and to bear witness, to go back to their communities and say all the good things that are happening here and what needs to be improved.
Thursday's events mark the end of the week-long sanctuary visits across the Midwest, including Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Indianapolis, Indiana. Leaders say they wanted to recreate the footsteps of those coming to the border to seek asylum.
We don't want to come off as a bunch of interlopers that are coming from around the country to show up, make some noise, and then leave. We want to work with local groups. We want to make sure that this is a long-term project, that we're in relationship with people, and the people on the ground are telling us that that's what they want us to do, and so that's what we're doing.
The Let Our Families Go leaders told me they raised nearly $25,000 so far that will go towards shelters and organizations here in the borderlands, such as the Annunciation House and the Hope Border Institute. In the studio, Stephanie Shields, KTSM 9 News.
The city of Eloy ended its role in an unusual contract that allowed ICE to run the South Texas Family Residential Center, the largest detention center in the U.S. Reporter Micah Bledsoe explains what happened and shares one detainee's story.
In 2014, there was a surge of families crossing the southwest border. The city of Eloy and Immigration Customs Enforcement amended an existing contract that allowed ICE to establish the South Texas Family Residential Center. The Department of Homeland Security reported ICE improperly modified this existing agreement with Eloy to establish the Texas Detention Center. The report gave recommendations and stated ICE made Eloy an unnecessary middleman. At the end of September, the city of Eloy canceled that part of the contract at ICE's request. In a statement, ICE spokesperson Paige D. Hughes explained that portion of the agreement with Eloy was ended and a new agreement negotiated with Dilley, Texas.
CoreCivic is a good corporate citizen in the community. We work well with them on a number of projects, and ICE felt it was in the best interest of us ending the contracts.
CoreCivic, formerly known as CCA, owns and manages private prisons, including the detention centers in Eloy and Dilley, Texas. While complaints against the operation of the facility didn't factor into ICE's decision to amend the agreement, according to the Government Accountability Office, in 2013, immigration prisons and jails failed to report 40% of sexual abuse allegations to ICE headquarters. Greta Soto Moreno, a transgender former Eloy detainee, says she was abused while detained at the Eloy Detention Center in 2013 after fleeing Mexico.
After my 300, 400, and 500 days, I was no idea what's going on. What should I do? I was tempted to cut off my hair. I was tempted to leave my facial hair. I was tempted to kill myself several times.
Soto Moreno says she was detained for 900 days. While detained, she says she was sexually abused by one of the detention officers, and when she reported it, she was not believed.
They say, no, this is our best officer here in this facility. Can you imagine the best officer being the best one from being accused to touch people improperly? How the rest could be?
We reached out to CoreCivic for a response. Here's part of the statement from Amanda Gilchrist, the Director of Public Affairs. We're committed, as we have been for 3 decades, to creating a safe environment for the individuals ICE entrusts to our care and to following all federal guidelines on the appropriate accommodation of transgender detainees. Our ICE contracted facilities are contractually required and held accountable to federal performance-based national detention standards, which include guidelines for the safe and appropriate accommodation of transgender detainees. To ensure compliance and accountability, ICE maintains full-time, on-site staff who monitor conditions and contractual performance. After multiple denied petitions to be removed from the detention center in Eloy, Soto Moreno says she tried to kill herself.
The reason that I've been removed from Arizona is because I cut off my testicles.
Soto Moreno was moved to the Santa Ana City Jail in California, but she believes the city of Eloy has a responsibility in making sure conditions are not overlooked. City manager Harvey Kraus says the city does not receive reports on the center's operation.
They release of any liability or any operational responsibilities of either the Eloy Detention Center or the Dilley facility.
Gilchrist's statement goes on to say, "We are proud of the quality of care we provide and will continue our long-standing commitment to ensure the safety and dignity of every individual in our facilities." Reporting in Eloy, Micah Bledsoe, Cronkite News.
CoreCivic also says all detention officers are required to complete more than 100 hours of training, which includes specific emphasis on a zero-tolerance policy regarding sexual abuse and harassment.
Welcome back. One final point before we go tonight. A new Gallup poll reports that 160 million adults from all over the world want to immigrate here to the United States. 160 million adults. That's 3% of all the adults in the entire world. And this doesn't even count kids and families. 160 million adults. That's equal to half the current population of the U.S. in total right now. Now, according to Gallup, in Central America, 16% of adults from Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, Panama, and Costa Rica want to come to the United States. 16% of adults from those countries. That is more than 5 million people from Central America who want to come to the U.S. right now. So the question is, should we let them all in? If we're supposed to let the migrants in the caravan into our country, just because those migrants claim asylum, remember that one migrant who said he'd been charged with murder in his country of origin and was hoping that charge would be forgotten once he reached the U.S.? Yeah. If we're supposed to let all the migrants in the caravan into our country, how can we say no to the 160 million adults around the world who want to come here? What if they all claim asylum? Ask your Democratic congressman. Ask your Democratic senator. Ask your liberal college professor. How many people should be allowed to come to the United States? How many should we let in? Which ones should we let in? Who decides which ones we let in and which ones we exclude? If it's xenophobic to build a wall, that's what liberals tell us, are we supposed to let 160 million adults from all over the world, plus their kids, plus their families, into our country? If not, why not? If so, who pays for them? Where are they supposed to live? What are they supposed to do for work? Are we supposed to give them government welfare and free health care? That's obviously not feasible, even for the most bleeding heart open borders liberals. So ask them, how many do we let in? Because 160 million people plus their families would come here in a snap if we said okay. And if we don't say okay, aren't we racists according to the left? The thing is, no liberal is going to say, sure, let all 160 million of those people in. And by saying no, the left admits we have a right to put restrictions on immigration, that we, the citizens of the United States, get to choose who comes to our country and when and how. And that's obviously not racist. So why then are laws guarding our borders, or walls guarding our borders so that we get to choose who comes here, racist? And that's my final point.
The city of Tijuana turned a sports facility into a migrant shelter for members of the Exodus, as most of them wait to apply for asylum in the U.S., a process that can take weeks because of backlogs at the ports of entry. The improvised shelter can fit up to 2,000 people, but the city doesn't have enough tents or staff just yet. Long lines formed outside the facility. Allison Vallecillo, a 4-year-old from Honduras, was among those waiting to get into the shelter, along with her parents. She was very clear about her ultimate destination, to the north, to the United States.
Al norte, al norte, al norte, al Estados Unidos.
After a few hours of waiting, the family got inside, where they have access to health checkups and bathrooms. Most of the other shelters are already overcrowded because of an influx of Mexicans fleeing violence in their own home states, like Michoacán and Guerrero. But even with the sports facility opening its doors, there isn't enough room for everyone in the caravan. Thousands more are still on their way. Earlier this week, hundreds set up camp in the upscale neighborhood of Playas de Tijuana. Videos on social media showed hundreds of Mexicans coming by throughout the night, telling the Central Americans to go home. They accused them of leaving trash and messing up the community. Violence broke out. Hugo Reynoso was there.
Try to help my people.
The next day, he spoke to one of the caravan migrants from Honduras, apologizing for what happened and trying to explain.
We have a bit of psychosis, a bit of fear, because we've suffered so much in the city.
Reynoso says residents are worried because homicides are at an all-time high in the city, and they fear that the caravan is too rowdy.
This is nothing about discrimination or races. It's nothing like that. It's just to give, we was trying to give our opinions to them and tell them to, relax.
The city sent buses to the neighborhood all day to transport migrants to the sports facility turned shelter. But it's unclear what's going to happen when hundreds more arrive. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Well, border wall projects now have a start date on the Texas border, and construction companies are getting contracts to build. Not technically the president's border wall, but maintenance and extensions of current fencing. Tonight, our border reporter Oscar Margain explains how the projects mean that nature and religious sites will often end up in no man's land.
It's hard to say which one was my favorite because for me, my favorite bird is the one I'm looking at right now.
There are two things we learned about Seattle resident Paula Crockett that really gets her going. One, of course, is nature. She's a birder. The other, well, she puts it best.
Now I'm a dissident.
Paula and a handful of bird watchers have come to the National Butterfly Center, a 100-acre property that extends to the edge of the Rio Grande, to spot rare species of animals.
I have wanted to see one of these for ages.
A wildlife center, now in the path of a border wall. Customs and Border Protection announced a construction contract for 6 miles of levee wall with bollard fencing along the current levee road that divides the Butterfly Center, and another 8 miles on the east side of the county for a total of $312 million.
Once they come in here with the bulldozers, all of this will be gone.
The center's director, Mariana Trevino Wright, has been fighting this wall project for nearly 2 years.
We're going to lose 70% of our land, and they're going to excavate this earthen levee and clear all of the vegetation for a minimum 150-foot enforcement zone.
The government has waived more than 24 environmental laws. Trevino Wright says that puts hundreds of animal species at risk.
So there is nothing in any current lawsuit that we have faith will stop the seizure of the land.
The project will affect other wildlife refuges and residential areas. It will also leave the historical 150-year-old chapel La Lomita in no man's land. The Catholic Church is seeking a restraining order on the government, citing infringement on their religious freedom. The government offering $100 for 65 acres.
And it makes me unhappy and very angry.
Paula often voices her opposition. She supports a border security plan, but one that takes these concerns into account.
Wildlife doesn't know borders. They know habitat.
At this point, there's no stopping the project, set to break ground in February. In Mission on the Texas-Mexico border, I'm Oscar Margain reporting.
All right, so some of the Migrant Caravan have arrived at our southern border, and now we see thousands of others also coming. The AP reporting, quote, Migrant Caravan groups arrived by hundreds at U.S. border. Joining us now for a debate, former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, President Obama, Austin Goolsbee, and civil rights attorney Darrell Parks. Austin, it's so good to see you. You know why? Because I just played at the beginning of the show, I hope you were watching, a guy by the name of Barack Obama, who you love, you absolutely adore, and who I think did a horrible job. Okay, we disagree. And he sounded like Donald Trump about protecting our borders, respecting our sovereignty. What has happened from then until now?
Only good things. You know, look, Sean, you and I have been friends a long time. Yeah. And I will say, among Democrats, among liberals, I am totally in agreement that a country should control who comes into that country. So we should secure the border.
Well, all right, hang on.
Now,
mark this moment. That means your wonderful wife, who I have met and had dinner with, has finally had some influence on you. We're making progress.
Yes. Well, look, but here's what I'm saying. The caravan, I'm glad you're at least following up on this. The president was out trumpeting this as an invasion and the biggest threat to national security. The vast majority of the people in this caravan are still in the city of Guadalajara, which is 800, 900 miles away from the U.S. border. And
they're
there are
now
women
transportation,
escaping domestic violence in Guatemala. They're 4-year-old kids. This is not what we should be. If you're concerned about border security,
well, let me tell you why
let's
we
put
should
the
be
focus
concerned.
where it should be, not on these kids.
Let me concede. Putting aside, the 300 have been identified by both Mexican officials and Department of Homeland Security as to being bad elements that are trying to mix in with the caravan crowd of migrants. And as I watch them, and I would argue probably 99+% are good people, live in poverty, horrible lives, want what we all take for granted in this country. It's the 300 others that we have to worry about. Here's what I'm afraid of. Here's the video of what happened at the southern border in Mexico. And that is, they take the fence, they knock it down, they race across the border. For the safety and security of everybody, if this happens on our southern border, I don't want anybody hurt. All we're asking, if you want to come to this country, to do it legally. You're a lawyer. Do you respect the law?
Without question, we respect the law, Sean, and we expect that those people, once they get to the border, they're going to do the right thing. These people are, we shouldn't demonize them. They are trying to escape poverty. They're trying to escape political instability.
Did I demonize anybody?
I know you didn't, and I'm glad you did. You did. Tonight you're doing great, Sean. Thank you.
Oh,
but
tonight
I think
I'm
these
doing
people,
great.
they all
right. Just tonight, though.
You're doing great tonight. You do well all the time, but tonight you're doing great. Let me say this here. These people are looking for a better opportunity. They're looking for a better opportunity like all of us in America. I'm sure once they get there, they'll follow the rules.
We have laws.
I don't think we need to be as concerned.
We're a constitutional republic. We have borders, sovereignty, laws. And if you really want to be here, the first prerequisite has to be obey our laws, respect our laws. Don't just take it upon yourself.
Meantime, the White House remains silent, at least on Twitter, following the midterm elections. That's all while at least 800 people from the caravan have now reached the border, packing into shelters in Tijuana, Mexico. Reportedly, they plan to wait for the rest of the caravan before going to the port of entry. That's while border agents are watching very closely from the ground, air, and the water. And it's all while authorities in Yuma prepare. They are already seeing a big surge of migrants starting to come across the border there. ABC 15's Sonu Wasu is with agents out in the field in Yuma and gives us a first-hand account of what they're dealing with.
Yeah, we are near the San Luis port of entry, and this section right here is where Border Patrol agents found a man cutting through the razor wire fence trying to get across. This happened just a few days ago. It was all caught on camera. Border Patrol agents tell me you're looking at a human smuggler cutting through razor wire installed by the fence to get his group of people across. Agents also sharing with me this photo of migrants climbing the fence to get across.
They're able to cut, they're able to climb, and they're able to go under in order to get their people through.
Border Patrol Operations Officer Justin Callinger says they may be law enforcement first, but what they're looking at here today is a huge humanitarian mission.
Whereas they were running from us, now they're running to us in order to get and seek asylum or their credible fears situations that they feel they need to do.
The black and white video you see here captured on cameras set up at the U.S.-Mexico border in Yuma. It shows us a small glimpse of the big crisis on our nation's border. Agents here tell me no military forces have been sent to these parts yet. It's just Border Patrol and the U.S. National Guard trying to contain a growing situation.
We are part of this wonderful community, and as long as we're here, it's 24/7, 365, 7 days a week.
What's different now than years past, agents tell me they're seeing more family units and unaccompanied minors trying to cross through here. Some of the children traveling alone, just 14 to 15 years old. All of the migrants arrested by Border Patrol here in Yuma are now in ICE custody. Reporting from Yuma, Sonu Wasu, ABC 15.
All right, we've been warning you now for weeks. Thousands upon thousands of undocumented migrants, they have been marching towards America, our southern border. Now, the vast majority of these people, I have been saying, I believe, are coming here in search of a better life, more opportunity, the land of opportunity and freedom. But here's the problem. These individuals, they have not been vetted, no background checks, no criminal history checks, no proof of employment, no family ties to the U.S., no comprehension in some cases of what the laws of America are, no case for asylum. Many have no paperwork whatsoever, but they're demanding entry into the United States. And tonight, the first migrants have now reached our southern border, a group of around 80 migrants that split off from the much larger group. They claimed widespread harassment, mistreatment at the hands of their fellow migrants, and they were able to fast-track their journey north in vans to the United States. And according to the AP tonight, while another group of several hundred migrants will arrive in the next few days. Now, some have tried to scale a U.S. border fence. Look at these videos right near Tijuana. Others crawled through openings in that fence, forced to crawl back because U.S. Border Patrol agents responded, and they were about to enforce the law. That is not a good first impression. This is just a small part of how many people are actually coming, and a clear warning of a looming crisis. And according to reports from Mexican officials, as many as 10,000 migrants are just days away. Now, the Department of Homeland Security is warning, and they have put out statements that over 270 suspected criminals, gang members, drug traffickers have been blending in with what is a mostly male caravan. We've also learned that some illegal immigrants previously deported from the U.S., they're also attached to the group. Now 7,000 active duty U.S. soldiers, they have been deployed to help secure the southern border. Now, they have been laying razor wire and constructing other barriers to prevent illegal immigration, protecting our sovereignty, our rule of law. We are a constitutional republic. It's important to remember, weeks ago, we witnessed the breaking down of that fence, as you can see, in southern Mexico on their border, crashing the gates into that country. This is a serious situation, an important reminder about why strong borders, the rule of law, and yes, the wall are so important. Now, if the president's plan had been implemented so far for a massive border wall, that had been completed with a big door in it, as he has said, the situation would be mitigated. It would be controlled. As a matter of fact, it would not even be a possibility of some type of confrontation at our border. God forbid. America needs immigrants, but we have to vet anyone, everyone coming into this country. We have to do everything in our power to prevent criminals, other bad people, even if they're mixing in with good people, from entering this country. And this is the very reason even Democrats just a few short years ago supported the enforcement of our border laws and our border. Remember this.
I voted numerous times when I was a senator to spend money to build a barrier to try to prevent illegal immigrants from coming in. And I do think you have to control your borders.
People who enter the United States without our permission are illegal aliens, and illegal aliens should not be treated the same as people who entered the U.S. legally. The American people will never accept immigration reform unless they truly believe that their government is committed to ending future illegal immigration.
Those who enter our country illegally and those who employ them disrespect the rule of law. And because we live in an age where terrorists are challenging our borders, we cannot allow people to pour into the U.S. undetected, undocumented, and unchecked.
Oh, of course, now they're singing a much different tune. They sounded like Donald Trump. The party has moved so far radical left that virtually no Democrat supports border enforcement. And now with the caravan marching north, the left is doing anything and everything to play this situation down. It could get serious. Imagine for a second, thousands of people, not just 80, at the border. What happens then? Take a look.
When we're sending 15,000 troops to the border for a political stunt, that's a warning sign.
There is no doubt that what the president was considering great strategy to bring out his base, with, this stupid caravan conspiracy theory, which he hasn't talked about since Election Day.
We see what he's doing with our troops at the border, essentially using them as props.
It seems that we've gotten the all clear, the emergency is over, and the solution to the caravan invasion all along, it wasn't the troops, it wasn't walls, it was apparently just getting past the midterm elections.
And I just remember when I would look up every single night, every single show, the caravan is coming and these people are coming and they're going to take your jobs and they're going to be doing all this. And it's like, and now you don't hear anything. And those people, they bought it hook, line, and sinker. People bought it. Oh, my gosh, we should be putting up barbed wire. Don't you want to be ready?
Some people did.
Oh, my gosh.
Some people.
Now, unlike CNN, MSNBC, their cohorts in the Democratic Party, we are going to continue to track what is a very serious situation. All right, the crisis at our southern border is growing more serious every day. In Arizona, over 650 illegal immigrants crossing the border were just detained in just the last 48 hours. And according to our own William LaJeunesse, a dozen members of the caravan were arrested Wednesday night near San Diego for crossing the border illegally. Remember, only the first few hundred migrants have arrived. We're expecting a couple of thousand in just the next few days, and then many more after that. Let me be clear. I have said I really believe the vast majority of people in this caravan are probably people that are poor. They have good intentions. They're looking for a life for themselves, their family, a good job, a better future. And there is, for us, a massive security risk. Now, criminals also will take advantage of unchecked, unvetted migration into our country. We see it every day. Look at what happened in Arkansas on Sunday. A 29-year-old illegal immigrant opening fire on officers during a traffic stop outside of Fayetteville. We have the dash cam footage, but be warned, this video is disturbing.
Shots fired, kid! Kenny, I need units now!
This is why we talk about vetting people before they come into the country. Thankfully, no officers were injured. The perpetrator was taken into custody. But this act of violence is unacceptable, and the very reason secure borders, a strong system of vetting are vitally important. When I sat through a security briefing in Texas with Rick Perry, 642,000 crimes they had documented in a 7-year period of time. Some not serious, but some very serious, going up to murder. That's in one state. And while most Americans support common sense border security measures, far-left Democrats are continuing to demonize those who are just trying to protect us and enforce our laws. Take, for example, California Senator Kamala Harris, who just today literally compared ICE to the KKK in the sense that, well, don't you think that there's a perception problem that ICE seems like the KKK? Well, speaking with the nominee to lead that agency, watch this.
The Klan was what we would call today a domestic terrorist group.
Why? Why would we call them domestic terrorist group?
Because they tried to use fear and force to change political environment.
And what was the motivation for the use of fear and force?
It was based on race and ethnicity.
Right. Are you aware of the perception of many about how the power and the discretion at ICE is being used to enforce the laws? And do you see any parallels?
I do not see any parallels between
I'm talking about perception.
officers and agents.
I'm talking about perception.
I do not see a parallel between what is constitutionally mandated as it relates to enforcing the law.
Are you aware that there's a perception?
I see no.
Are you aware that there's a
that
perception?
puts ICE in the same category as the KKK? Is that what you're asking me?
That senator wants to be your next president. Now, what you just saw is beyond despicable. Now, to be that patronizing, frankly, idiotic, utterly disrespectful to men and women in law enforcement that put their lives on the line for us every single solitary day is shameful. How many border agents have been injured or killed performing their daily work? It's exactly what I've been warning you about. This is the most radical crop of Democrats to ever come to Washington. Instead of respecting our laws, our sovereignty, our Constitution, they push for open borders, sanctuary cities and states, and without a doubt, they're saying they want to abolish ICE, the very organization responsible for enforcing our system of immigration laws. They don't care how much it costs, what danger it poses to you, the American people. They want wide open borders.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pat Paris.
And I'm Stella Ingram. Military officials were on the U.S.-Mexico border today to talk about adding security in preparation for the migrant caravan.
9 on your side's Taja Davis was in Nogales to get the soldiers' perspective about working along the border as they support customs and border protection.
Pat, Stella, talking with Army soldiers from the DeConcini and Mariposa port of entries. They say they're taking Customs and Border Protection's lead. They say the Department of Defense has military units out here until December 15th, but that date is mission dependent.
You know, engineering is engineering, regardless of where we are in the world, whether we're training back at Fort Hood, Texas, or whether we're in Tucson, Arizona, Iraq, or Afghanistan. You know, we provide capability to whoever we're supporting. And in this case, we're supporting the Customs and Border Protection.
These soldiers are a part of the 5,000 troops near the country's southwest border to prepare for the expected arrival of the migrant caravan. Last week, they started placing razor wire above the border fence, a task that is not yet complete. And yesterday, the Army helped close 2 lanes at the DeConcini port of entry.
So it has been a challenge. It is not a standard mission set that we trained for back at Fort Hood, but as Army engineers, our job is to solve difficult problems for whoever we're supporting.
Weld the pickets up to the fence, run the C-wire with barbed wire underneath it, and strap it to it.
There is no official word yet if they plan on keeping these reinforcements in place after the caravan has arrived, if it does. CBP says there's a good chance the caravan will arrive in about a week. Taja Davis, KGUN 9 on